Hey friends, Olivia from Ollie. Between new routines and the ultimate group project known as parenting, you need science-backed solutions that work with your life. That's where Ollie comes in. Start your mornings off right with multis made to support nutrition and immune health. Choose from our lineup of gut-supporting probiotics, and we've got occasional sleep support to help the whole fam chase their big dreams. Head back to class with the #1 gummy supplement brand. Stock up on ollie.com today. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Welcome to This Feels Familiar. I'm your host, Minaa B. I'm a therapist, author, and creator of the Siblinghood Theory, and this show explores the themes of belonging, conflict, and the relational patterns shaping your life. So let's dive in. For today's episode, I'm going to be talking about anxiety, but I'm going to get a little more specific, and I'm going to talk about catastrophic thinking. I'm going to list some scenarios for you, and I want you to reflect and think about how your body responds when these situations arise. And so let's say for those of you who are single, you're dating someone and you've been texting back and forth, and all of a sudden you notice that a few hours go by and there's no response. Or let's say you've been talking a certain way for so long and you notice that they're not sending the emojis anymore, their messages seem a little short. How does your brain and body respond to that? Do you start to think they're mad at me, or they're losing interest, or they're probably not interested in going on that date anymore? Maybe I should end this before they hurt me. All of that from a shift in texting. Now, outside of dating, let's just say you make a general mistake at work. It's nothing catastrophic. It could be that you sent an email and after you sent it, you realized there was a typo in the email, or maybe you missed a deadline by a day and your brain starts to spiral. You start thinking, I'm going to get fired. I'm never going to find another job. I'm going to lose my apartment. My life is over. And then you just start to feel this heaviness on your chest. This is catastrophic thinking. And it's something that happens in the background of our day-to-day lives that can truly and significantly not only impact our own mental health, but it can also impact the relationships that we are trying to build and sustain. So before I get deeper into this episode, please take a moment to subscribe to the show so that you do not miss any episodes moving forward. So let me be clear here about what I'm talking about, because catastrophic thinking is different from regular worry. Regular worry is realistic and grounded. So let's say you have a presentation tomorrow at work. That means you're going to prepare for it. That makes a lot of sense, to prepare for something so that you can be on your P's and Q's. Or let's say in a different scenario, you haven't heard from a friend in a really long time. Maybe they even seem a little distant. And so you reach out and ask how they're doing. That's healthy concern. It's based in reality and it leads to action. Catastrophic thinking, however, is different. It's when your brain takes a small neutral trigger and immediately jumps to the absolute worst outcome. Not just possible outcome. It treats the catastrophe like it's already happening, and your body responds like it's real. So take a moment to pause, because I'm going to be honest with y'all. I have had this experience myself. I'm not above experiencing anxiety or catastrophic thinking. And immediately, the first thing that I can feel happening is it literally feels like my heart sank into my stomach. Like my heart literally just starts moving really, really fast. And I feel sick. I feel physically ill. And so you might realize you have the same symptoms. You might even have a headache. You feel panic. Often anxiety will manifest not just in how we think, but also physiologically, which is why it's always important to pay attention to how your body responds to triggers and different things that are happening around you, because your body often is the first responder. And so I think it's important for us to pay attention to catastrophic thinking, because it can have a massive impact on your life. I'm going to include some data here, okay? Because catastrophic thinking isn't just an annoying thought pattern. It has real effects on your mental health and your relationships. Research shows that people who engage in catastrophic thinking have significantly higher rates of anxiety and depression. The American Psychological Association has documented that catastrophic thinking, also called catastrophizing, is a core feature of anxiety disorders. The pattern of assuming worst case scenarios keeps your nervous system in a state of constant threat. So let's break down what's happening in your brain. When you catastrophize, you're activating your amygdala, which is the part of your brain that is responsible for threat detection. Our bodies are such this beautiful, beautiful thing because our bodies are wired to keep us safe. And by doing so, it is going to scan the environment for a potential threat. Your amygdala is responsible for that and it is trying to protect you. It is literally scanning for danger. But it can overestimate what a threat is. It can see a neutral text message and treat it as if it is a life or death situation. Now, I also want to add that I do think the more we shift culturally regarding how we communicate with one another and what is seen as a normal form of communication, this can also play a role in why your brain is detecting a particular threat, even though a threat is not real or happening in the moment. And I'm using texting as a primary example because I do think there is a huge difference between how we treat texting in our current society versus how we treated texting maybe 10 to 15 years ago. Because I know when I first got a cell phone, I was super excited to be able to text my friends, but I was a teenager when that was happening. And even when I was in my 20s, it was normalized around that time that when you got a text, it was still this exciting thing. People communicated very swiftly, very promptly. And we also didn't have emojis and different things like that. And so we also didn't have social media to the extent that we have it now. And so 10 to 15 years ago, depending on the type of messages that you got, you probably weren't overestimating threats. You probably didn't even detect any threats because the way communication happened 10 to 15 years ago is completely different from how it happens now in a culture where a lot of people are burnt out. A lot of people don't prioritize communicating as promptly as they used to in the past. And also, there's a generational shift here because Gen Z, for example, views communication and texting completely different from millennials or even Gen Xers. So, I also want to add that point here because I think the reason why our brain is often searching for some sort of threat is because society is evolving. And the more society evolves, it's hard to take note of what is normal versus what is scary, especially when you're recognizing society is evolving and the cultural norms are shifting away from what you are used to, which means we are constantly going to be scanning our relationships and the way we communicate because the way we communicate is always going to be changing. Even think about phone calls. Now, when someone's phone rings, it can feel like a threat. It can feel anxiety inducing because we're living in an era now where people think it can be intrusive for you to call someone's phone. It's intrusive to leave a voicemail. But 10 to 15 years ago, that was expected and that was normal. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there is a major relational piece here. Research on attachment styles show that people who catastrophize tend to develop anxious attachment patterns. They're hypervigilant in all of their relationships and they're constantly scanning for signs of rejection or abandonment. And the problem is that the more hypervigilant you are in those relationships, there is a stronger likelihood that you may damage those relationships. And so now that you understand that your brain is trying to protect you, I want to go a little deeper here as to why. If you imagine the worst thing that could happen, maybe you can prepare for it. Maybe you can prevent it. Your brain thinks that if it worries enough, it can keep you safe. And as you hear that, you might be nodding your head and saying, Mina, I do this all the time. I think myself into oblivion because what I'm really trying to do is manage what feels uncontrollable. But here is what truly matters. Most people who struggle with catastrophic thinking have relational trauma in their past. And so maybe you are someone who has experienced abandonment, maybe by your parents or your siblings, or even in your early friendships growing up. Maybe you experienced betrayal. It could have been somebody that you were actually in a relationship with. It could be with somebody that you were dating. It could even be in a friendship. Maybe you watched someone you love get hurt or rejected. So understand here that sometimes we can have experiences where we were traumatized, but also there's a such thing called indirect trauma where watching other people endure trauma and being exposed to those traumatic experiences can also negatively impact our nervous system, even though the trauma is not directly happening to us. So you can see your best friend's marriage crumble, or even think about your parents. If you saw a very unhealthy marriage growing up, that could negatively influence how you even approach relationships. So I want you to think about those things. Maybe you also grew up with unpredictability. One day everything was fine, and the next day everything was falling apart. This is very common for people who grew up in poverty, or it's common for people who grew up in military homes where you were constantly moving around. There was no stability, and that lack of stability can cause you to feel extremely anxious. Your nervous system is learning something critical, which is danger can literally come out of nowhere. And that is a reality. A lot of us probably wish we could be fortune tellers and know when something bad is going to happen, but we can't. And as a result of not having that ability, we recognize that safety can be fragile, especially if you are someone who has experienced a really, really, really severe traumatic thing happen to you in life, whether it be a traumatic relationship or again, you grew up in poverty. And so you know at one point what that felt like, and you probably don't want to go there. I would imagine you don't want to go back to living in poverty. So you realize that these are all the things that you have to do to try to make sure you stay afloat. But most importantly, you recognize that safety is fragile. People leave, experiences happen, rejection can happen at any moment. And so now, as an adult, your brain is hypervigilant. It's scanning everything: text messages, tone of voice, how long someone takes to respond. It's scanning for signs that the catastrophe is coming. Because in your past relational experiences, the catastrophes did come. People did leave. Trust was broken, and your brain is operating from what it learned. And it's trying to protect you from experiencing that pain again. But the cost is that you're living in a constant state of threat, and every relationship you enter in probably feels scary. Every connection you make feels like it can shatter at any moment. And I imagine that that is a very exhausting place to be. Speaking for myself, I have dealt with catastrophizing in so many different areas of my life. And like I said, it wreaks havoc not only on your mind, but also on your body. And I think what we all struggle with is this illusion of control. There's an illusion that some form of control is happening if you catastrophize enough. So if you catastrophize, if you worry enough, maybe you can prevent the bad things from happening. But the reality is the only thing that's happening is burnout and exhaustion. So I want to shift gears really quickly to talk about how catastrophic thinking hurts your relationships, because this show explores the themes of belonging, conflict, and relational patterns shaping our lives. And it's important to recognize how anxiety can impact our ability to belong. It can also increase conflict in our relationships, and it can definitely create certain patterns in our lives that impact the way we make friends or even date. So I want you to pay attention to the things I'm about to list to see if this comes up for you.
Hey friends, Olivia from Ollie. Between new routines and the ultimate group project known as parenting, you need science-backed solutions that work with your life. That's where Ollie comes in. Start your mornings off right with multis made to support nutrition and immune health. Choose from our lineup of gut-supporting probiotics, and we've got occasional sleep support to help the whole fam chase their big dreams. Head back to class with the #1 gummy supplement brand. Stock up on ollie.com today. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Go further with the American Express Business Gold Card. Earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels when you book through AmexTravel.com. Whether your destination is a business conference or a client meeting, your purchases will help you earn more points for future trips. Experience more on your travels with Amex Business Gold. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold Card. Built for business by American Express.
First, you push people away preemptively. When you're dealing with catastrophic thinking, your brain tells you that someone is going to leave. So you leave first. You break up with them before they can break up with you. You end the friendship before they can reject you. You withdraw from the group before they can exclude you. You do all of this because it feels like self-protection, but what you're actually doing is making the exact outcome you're afraid of coming true. You're abandoning them before they can abandon you. But if the ultimate goal here was some form of connection, now that connection isn't there anymore. So you feel like you initiated it, and you might assume that because you initiated it, you protected yourself, but the outcome is still the outcome of you being alone and not having the trusted community and support systems in your life that you desire. The second way catastrophic thinking hurts your relationships is that it creates anxious attachment patterns. You're constantly seeking reassurance. You text people too much. You check in constantly. It's like you need the person to prove they still like you because your brain is telling you they're going to leave, or you're sensing some sort of threat based off how they're communicating with you. So you need constant evidence that they won't leave and that they still like you. The issue with this is that it does create exhaustion in relationships. Sometimes this can make the other person feel suffocated, and they can also feel like they can never do enough to reassure you. And the reality is, when you are struggling with severe anxious attachment to this level, enough really isn't enough. You have to ask yourself, when is enough? And if you're not doing the work to manage this anxiety, nothing is ever going to feel like it's enough because you're constantly going to be hypervigilant and you're constantly going to be scanning the interactions and creating a story around that. And those stories are often going to be negative. They're going to be catastrophic. And so if somebody says, hey, the reason why I didn't text you back so quickly is because I had a work meeting, you might say, okay, for now, but the next time it happens, you're going to be thinking they still have a work meeting. Why is this work meeting taking forever? Are they lying to me about this work meeting? That's what catastrophic thinking sounds like. Okay. And so people will eventually pull away when they realize you need this much reassurance for the relationship to remain stable. And I know that is a hard truth to hear, but as adults, if our goal is to build healthy, flourishing relationships, it's also important to recognize how we're showing up in those relationships and the burdens and the expectations we're putting on to others. And so it is your job to learn how to manage your anxiety and your anxious attachment. It's not someone else's job to do that. They can provide you with support, comfort, and care, but when it's to this degree where everything they do and every time they try to reassure you, it's just never enough, that's a sign that you probably need deep care. So I want you to pay attention to anxious attachment patterns. The third one is that you isolate and withdraw. You automatically assume people don't like you. You assume they're judging you, so you hide. You don't share vulnerably. You keep yourself small because it feels safer that way. Now, here's the issue though. Real relationships can't survive on the surface. Connection does require vulnerability. And right now, we're living in a loneliness epidemic. And the more we stay away from being vulnerable and open, the more we are going to be lonely. And when you're constantly assuming a rejection, you're not going to be able to be vulnerable because, again, you're doing everything that you can to protect yourself. So you end up isolated, which reinforces the belief that people don't like you. So this is something that needs to be challenged. And I'm going to be sharing some tips at the very end on all the things you can be doing to manage catastrophic thinking. Okay. So this last one is that you over communicate your catastrophes. So you tell people your worst case scenarios, you lay out all your fears, you ask them constantly if they still care about you. You need them to calm your anxiety. And at first, people might actually try to reassure you. They might be very understanding and they may say, sure, I get it. Maybe I've been there, or I just want you to know how much you mean to me. And so I'm going to do what I can to comfort you. But over time, it becomes a pattern. You're asking them to manage your anxiety instead of managing it yourself. And they can't do that for you. No amount of reassurance will fix catastrophic thinking. And so you end up feeling disappointed in them because they can't fix something that's not actually their responsibility to fix. And I know that this is deeply devastating for some people to confront. I have a lot of clients who have struggled with this, and it is something that you can work through. But the first sign is recognizing what you do and how it shows up in your relationship. So I want to go deeper here in how to interrupt catastrophic thinking. So the first strategy you can use is reality testing. When you catch yourself catastrophizing, ask yourself this: what's the evidence for this catastrophe? And what is the evidence against it? Please be mindful here, because sometimes when I say, what is the evidence for this catastrophe? It's really easy for someone to conveniently find all the awful things to say and say, well, that's the evidence, while purposefully ignoring all of the positive things that are happening. So when we say you need to catch yourself catastrophizing, what we're saying is you really need to hone in on the evidence, and honing on the evidence means paying attention to everything that's happening in the relationship, not the one isolated incident. Because if you've been texting this person every single day, they've been communicative, they've been responsive, and today they're just taking a little longer to text you, that's not evidence that they don't like you anymore. That's just evidence that they're slower to respond today. And that's really all it is. But if your mind goes, oh, this person doesn't like me anymore, you're also disregarding all the other conversations that took place. So it's important for you to look at the full story. And when you actually look at the evidence, the catastrophe usually doesn't hold up. It collapses. Reality is much more boring. Okay, it is much more boring than your catastrophe. Seriously, when you look at it and you're like, okay, this person took a few hours to text me back versus your mind went all the way into the depths of hell, you will realize how boring reality can be when you recognize it's not as dramatic as you're making it sound. So I want you to pay attention to that. The second strategy is to learn to ground yourself in the present moment, because catastrophic thinking lives in the future. It's always what if. So you need to bring yourself back to the right now. And one of the things that you can do, this is one of my favorite exercises, which is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. Name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This activates your present moment awareness and pulls you out of the catastrophe spiral. Okay, so you really want to learn to be in the physical present. Feel your feet on the ground, feel the chair you're sitting in, touch your hair. Do something to get your brain in the present, because again, catastrophic thinking lives in the future. The third strategy is cognitive reframing. This is where cognitive behavioral therapy comes in. So instead of accepting the catastrophe as truth, you need to reframe it. Ask yourself, what's actually likely to happen here? And what's the best case scenario? And what's the most likely scenario? So if your brain says they hate me and I'll never see them again, the most likely scenario might be they're busy and will text back later. And the best case scenario will be they'll text back and we'll laugh about the misunderstanding, or I will laugh at the misunderstanding. So I actually encourage you to write this in a journal. Your best case scenario, your most likely scenario, and what your brain is saying. When you intentionally consider other possibilities, you loosen the grip of the catastrophe. So utilize that practice consistently. The fourth strategy is to simply not act on the catastrophe. This is very important because when your brain is catastrophizing, don't act like the catastrophe is real. Please don't. Do not break up with them preemptively. Do not send a long, desperate text explaining all your fears. And don't withdraw and stop responding to people. Just notice what is happening in your mind and in your body. That's it. The amount of times we as people can impulsively act on our feelings, we don't realize how that can damage relationships. Your feelings are not facts. I remember learning this when I was in grad school. I wish I could remember who I learned it from, but now it's all over the internet and I don't know who deserves credit for it. But when I heard that phrase, it literally helped me reframe just how I navigate so many situations. Because in the CBT world, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the cognitive distortions we talk a lot about is emotional reasoning, which is we say, because I feel this way, it must be true. And therefore, I have to act on that thing. So if I feel sad or if I am having catastrophic thoughts, those thoughts must be true. They must be real. And therefore, I have to act on them. And I'm not realizing that actually they're not real. They're just things that I'm making up in my head. So before I get to a place where I'm acting on it, I need to just simply acknowledge what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. And sometimes just step away. Just acknowledge what you're thinking and feeling and step away. Stop staring at your phone. Put your phone on mute or do not disturb. Do something to get yourself out of the spiral that you're in. So acknowledge that by saying, my brain is catastrophizing right now, and then just wait. Usually within a few hours or even in a day, reality catches up and proves the catastrophe wrong. And so I really encourage you to implement all 5 of these strategies. And the last strategy that I am going to share is a distraction strategy. I truly do believe that sometimes we can engage in catastrophic thinking is when we don't have much on our plate and we have idle time, and therefore it gives you the space and the ability to just think and ruminate all day long. So distract yourself. It might look like listening to a podcast. It might look like reading a book or turning on one of your favorite Netflix shows and finding something you can binge watch. Another thing is that the brain loves familiarity. And so I also want you to think of things that feel safe, nourishing, and familiar. So when I am dealing with anxiety or I'm just having a certain kind of day, I will rewatch Girlfriends all day long. Why? Because no matter how many times I watch Girlfriends, I still laugh at it. I still love the episodes. I still find them funny all these years later. Or I'll watch Insecure or Silicon Valley. I'll just watch all of these shows that are lighthearted and funny because my brain is searching for something that feels familiar. And as a result of it being familiar, it feels safe to my body. And the reason why this is important is because remember what I shared earlier, the amygdala is searching for a threat. It's all about threat detection. One of the best ways we can mitigate a threat is by leaning on what feels familiar so that your brain can acknowledge, oh, we're actually safe right now because we're getting those dopamine hits. We're watching this show that feels really lighthearted. So it doesn't have to just be watching a show, but I do encourage you to think about things that are healthy and nourishing that are also familiar to your body as a tool that you can lean on whenever you are feeling this level of anxiety. So I want you to understand that your brain is trying to protect you here. This is why we engage in catastrophic thinking. It's happening for a reason. But you also have to recognize when it's not protecting you anymore and it's actually hurting you. The good news, however, is that you can retrain your brain and you can interrupt the spiral. You can learn to reality test instead of believing the catastrophe. And as you learn to manage catastrophic thinking, something shifts in your relationships. You stop pushing people away preemptively. You stop needing constant reassurance. You can be more present and you can actually receive love instead of constantly fearing you'll lose it. You'll also notice how your relationships will improve and your mental health will improve. But it starts with noticing the catastrophe and choosing not to believe it. And so if this episode resonated with you, please rate and subscribe to the show. Also, please subscribe to my newsletter, All the Hard Things, on Substack, and make sure to get a copy of my book, Owning Our Struggles, which is available everywhere books are sold, including the audiobook. So remember this. Your catastrophic thoughts aren't predictions. They're your anxious brain trying to protect you. And you don't have to believe the thoughts that you have. Feelings are not facts. Simply notice what you're feeling, reality test them, and choose a different story. Until next time.
Class is now in session. And the UPS Store is here to help you ace arriving on campus. Our certified packing experts can pack everything you need, from desktops to decor. Plus, when you pack and ship with us, you get our exclusive pack and ship guarantee. Your items arrive safe or your money back. Restrictions and limitations apply. To get a 20% off packing coupon and for full details, visit theupsstore.com/packing.